So while the NBA free agency craziness was going on, we had some big news in the MLB this week. So Pete Alonso is returning to the Mets for 2 years, $54 million with an opt-out after this season. So there's a couple things to break down here. One thing is Pete Alonso, who's represented by Scott Boras, they turned down a $150+ million deal in the summer of 2023. They bet on themselves. And going into this free agency cycle, Alonso was a guy who was looking for a $200 million+ long-term extension from a team, tested the waters of free agency, ends up back in New York, where I think that's where he ended up all along. So that's a plus for Alonso, but only a 2-year deal, $54 million, still $27 million a year, but still not what Alonso was looking for in free agency. But Alonso didn't draw the interest in the numbers he was maybe looking for in free agency. This is a guy whose power numbers were down last year, only hit 34 home runs, which is still, Alonso is still a great player, very valuable bat. 34 home runs is still a lot, but it's down from the 46 he hit the year prior, and also his OPS was under 800 for the first time in his career. So maybe Alonso was looked at as a guy that was on a little bit of a decline. He's 30 years old now, so he's starting to age a little bit. I'm not saying he couldn't have a resurgent year, and he still doesn't have a lot of power in his bat again. Really good player. I just don't think teams were willing to give him the long-term deal worth $200+ million he was looking for after a little bit of a decline in his bat last year. But for Alonso, he does have the opt-out, so if he goes and has a monster 2025, he can opt out, test free agency again, get a better deal. In the Mets, if Alonso doesn't have as great of a year, you have him on a pretty team-friendly deal and let him stick around for another year in 2026. I think by a lot, this is looked at as a loss for Scott Boras, who gets criticized a lot after he had a really rough offseason last year. But Scott Boras is doing just fine, even though he didn't hit here. He represents Juan Soto, Corbin Burns, and Blake Snell, who all cashed in tremendously this offseason. So he did have a bounce-back offseason for the agent. But, this is maybe looked at as kind of a loss for them here. This is down drastically for what Pete and Boras were looking for this offseason. But, again, I think this is a really good move for the Mets. I know the Mets fans are happy. Having Pete Alonso back 100% makes the Mets better. Again, great hitter. 34 home runs last year and a 788 OPS isn't terrible. It's down for a guy like Alonso, but he's still a really good bat in the middle of that lineup. He also showed last year he can get some big hits. He was really struggling down the stretch, but hit a lot of big home runs in the postseason last year, especially most notably off of Devin Williams to send them to the divisional series last year. And I think Alonso's going to have a resurgent year. I really do think he's going to slug over 40 homers again next year. OPS is going to be back up around 850, and I think he's probably going to opt out after the 25 year and test free agency again. So overall, I think this is a really good deal for the Mets, and I don't think it's terrible for Alonso, but Cohen did show in this area that he wasn't willing to give in and give Pete that big long contract. We'll have to see how it plays out.